Welcome to ACF Chef's Table Forum. Thank you for joining today's webinar on gas or electric. What utility is right for your commercial kitchen? For those unfamiliar with the American Culinary Federation, we're the leading organization for culinary professionals, offering education, certification, and a community for chefs and food service leaders. If you're not yet a member, today's webinar is a great example of the valuable resources we offer. Today, we're joined by Certified Master Chef Russell Scott as he shares his thoughts and perspectives from his time in operations and kitchen equipment manufacturing on this trending topic of gas and electric appliances. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at any time. Let's get started by sharing where you're tuning in from the chat. I'm Christopher Tanner, ACF's Executive Director, and I'm excited to have you all here. Let's meet today's presenter, Master Chef Russell Scott. He is the Corporate Chef and Vice President of Culinary for the Middleby Corporation in Lewisville, Texas. Prior to his position with Middleby Corp., Chef Russell gained extensive experience working as executive chef of the hotel and club industry, including his position as culinary director for the club at Carlton Woods and the director of clubhouse operations at the Everglades. Chef Russell has also been the Dean of Education for the Culinary Institute of America at Greystone, responsible for the quality and effectiveness of all education programs at the college's campus in St. Helena, California. Through his profession, Chef Scott has earned numerous ACF awards, including USA Chef of the Year in 2008 and the Chef Professionalism Award in 2011. Chef Scott was a member of Culinary Team USA, winning 2 gold medals in the World Championship in Hot Food at the International Culinary Olympics in 2004 and another gold at the 1998 Culinary World Cup. Wow, that is impressive, Chef. So, and you and I've known each other for a while, so it's all the formalities there, but let's get into this conversation here. I'm really looking forward to this. So,
yeah, thank you, Chris. Likewise.
Let's kick off the discussion with a trend topic, a trend question. Are you seeing a shift toward electric equipment in food service? Why now, and what's driving this interest?
Yeah, Chris, we are, again, food and beverage equipment manufacturers, we are seeing greater interest, questions from folks about electric equipment. I think this is a really key topic now, not just because it's going to affect cooks across the country, but I also think the subject, for myself, I hadn't thought about this a lot in my career. I was worried about the food and my food cost and getting food up in a timely fashion and things like that. But chefs of tomorrow and the week after are going to have to make some decisions, and it's not really as cut and dry as some might have you think. So I'm so excited to talk about this topic as well. And I think everybody else, as I chat with people around the country, it is a growing topic, and hopefully today the goal would be to have that introductory conversation, talk about some of the details that chefs and cooks are going to have to consider, so they can quantify this decision, for themselves.
That's pretty interesting. So, it's we always start off in our industry using gas, right? And this electric thing has been around for a while. We're going to talk a little bit about induction as well, but gas versus electric, what do you think more chefs want?
Yeah, so if you're talking strictly about preference, Chris, gas, right? It's there immediately. The speed for chefs is really important. It's a comfort for chefs, right? I don't have to look down. I turn it and crank it to get what I want. Whenever I see what I want to happen in that skillet, I can turn it back or turn it up higher. And that's really, really an important thing. That's only one piece of the conversation, right? There's expense involved, there's efficiency involved and stuff like that. So hopefully today we can get to some of those, but I also hope that answers your question. In general, I don't speak for everybody, but I'd have to think that most folks like gas if they can get it.
What do you think there's a huge performance difference between the two of them?
Yes. So when you say performance, so I want to clarify, we're talking about efficiency. So we can maybe equate that to a percentage.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking about gas and electric. And let me even go further and say traditional electric, right? So this would be a cow rod on some kind of platform, not induction. So we're going to specifically say gas, traditional electric, and induction for our conversation today. Gas and traditional electric. Traditional electric is probably 75 to 85% efficient. Gas, probably 60% efficient. So you can, I think, justify this with this image. Think about a pot on a stove and gas underneath it, the flame kind of coming out from the bottom of that stove, all of that energy escaping. That's 60%. You put the pot on that electric platform, and that energy is going right into the pot. And yes, you have a little bit of waste, but it's less, right? So 75 to 85%. Now, induction is even more efficient, 94, 95% efficient. So there is a performance difference. But the conversation continues, Chris, because although electric and induction are more efficient, there's an expense that goes with that as well. So generally speaking, we say that gas per unit of energy is less expensive than electric. So here's a matrix that will help illustrate that. Generally speaking, on the East Coast, electric is considered to be 4 times more expensive than gas equipment. On the West Coast, it's even greater. I've read up to 7 times more, depending on exactly where you're at.
Yeah. What are the sales differences between gas, electric, and induction?
Oh, so you're saying my company sells both gas, makes and sells both gas and electric, and you're saying what's the ratio there?
Yeah.
You want to have some fun? I'm going to turn that back around on you, Chris. And do you want to take a stab at, in the United States, and I've had a chance to go back and get our sales figures, gas versus electric. You want to take a stab?
Yeah, as much as I'm seeing that, the laws and regulations in places like New York are moving towards saying you have to have electric, I don't think we're there yet. So I'm going to say like a 90-10 leaning toward gas still.
Oh man, you are up on this. So our company sells 80% gas, 20% electric in this country currently, right? Those are good recent stats. And there's growing interest, but we should look at that a little bit. Growing interest in the electric. Whenever people are coming to us right now, they're coming to us because they have a governmental mandate. So this would be a regional restriction. Here's an example. California and Washington State, starting in 2025, all of their new commercial food service builds must be exclusively electric. I'm going to say that again because that's big, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in California and Washington, you already know this.
Yep.
And in addition to those 2 states, there are a number of other smaller localities. New York City has sections that are already exclusively electric. And, that might be a local legislation issue, but it also might be a facilities requirement or limitation, right? Certain old buildings, you can't pull gas into very effectively. And even new buildings, to add gas to an existing building is harder than adding electric. But also adding electric is a challenge as well, too. So that's what it's looking like in the States. And the reason, again, I want to restate that because I think it's an important piece. People are coming to us because they're being forced to. Either the number one reason is legislation, but the number 2 reason is physical limitations. They can't pull gas into an existing place, so they're gonna try to solve that problem with electric.
Yeah. Where's induction fit into this?
Yeah, really good. So induction operates differently than traditional electric. It's electric, but as I said, electric would be characterized by an iron cowl rod, right, that we put electricity through. It generates the heat, and then that heat permeates. In the old school, the home ones, you would put your pot right on the cowl rod. In the industry, there's a platen or a platform that goes on top of that to help moderate that heat a little bit, right? So as we said, this is 75 to 85% efficient. You're going to have a nice flat pot. If you have air in there, that transfer is not as efficient, right? So Comparing that to induction. So induction has a heat generator, but it's not a cow rod. We call it a hob. So it generates the heat and then it transfers that heat directly to the pot through magnets. This is incredibly efficient. Now, a couple of things. In the past, you really had to have specific pots for induction, right? This is no longer the case. Whenever I started, I'm not going to give you a date, Chris. Whenever I started, there was a lot of kitchens that had exclusively aluminum because they're less expensive.
Yeah.
They're not induction friendly, right?
Yeah.
Today, almost everybody makes bimetals and trimetals, pots that have some degree of iron, ferrous metals. The more ferrous metal they have, the better they work, the more efficient they are. For an example, cast iron, it's incredible for induction. But again, almost everybody makes these bimetals and trimetals that work well on induction. So that's not as much of a problem these days. Another challenge used to be the surface, right? So that hob underneath that generates the heat transfers that through the surface on top. And for induction, in the past, it's been a type of glass.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, pots on glass equal potential disaster or at least expense, right? There's been a lot of technology advancement in that area too. So the term that we use is ceram, not ceramic. So it's a glass and ceramic mixture. And these things are really tough. So you can go online and find a bowling ball test. We call it a very scientific term, bowling ball test for induction surfaces, right? So better surfaces, more durable, pans are pretty good. But I also want to caution people, for years I worked with induction and these were really inexpensive, $30, $40, $70 little hobs that I would put out for brunch or pasta night. This is not today's induction. So much more power. You're not really plugging these into 115 or 120 commercial kitchen outlets. These are 20 amp, 30 amp, and depending on, how big the piece is, 50 amp plugs, single phase, three phase, what works for you. So I know that might've been a little wordy, but hopefully that can help people understand the differences.
No, sure. Well, it's interesting to say that because when I first walked into my position here 2 years ago, I walked into a pile of induction burners,
right,
where I could tell they're the $100, $50, $100 burners, and I did not use. I have all clad pans. I tried using an all clad pan on it. Wouldn't work. But if I put it onto, one of the, obviously you've put together the new kitchens that we use for ACF competitions.
Yeah.
I can put those on there, and there's no issue working with them whatsoever. So the technology's changed, but we're looking at 210 rather than one. And the amperage is completely different, and so it just the efficiency is to me substantial. And the one thing I've always heard, and you and I've talked about this before, we're taught when we're first to toss the pan when we're cooking, and we're told don't remove the pan from the induction burner because the magnet's not going to work. Well, guess what? The same thing happens when you take it off the flame. So there's no real difference there. So, and that efficiency you talked earlier about it, I think, the efficiency is based off usage of the chef using the pan as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So there are clearly pluses and minuses for each. And that's really why I'm going to stress that it really is an individual decision. But there's a couple of other things we should be talking about too.
Yeah, let's talk about costs. So you mentioned a little bit about cost up front. So obviously there's long-term cost, utility and repair costs. Let's talk about, we talked about just a little bit about efficiency, maintenance, repair trends, total cost of ownership. What are your thoughts around those?
Yeah. So just to restate, the electric, a little bit more efficient than gas, but gas as a unit of energy is far less expensive than electric. I think once you jump past that in other costs, how about the equipment? How about a gas oven and an electric oven? The gas oven itself is going to be a little less expensive than the electric oven. It's just a simpler infrastructure, a simpler format. The electric needs a little bit more material in there. So there's that difference. I think if you're starting from the beginning, bringing the power, we talked about the cost of the unit of energy, we talked about the equipment, but bringing that power to the kitchen Gas is a little bit more expensive and a little harder, right? You're usually coming in through the ground and up. If you're starting from the beginning, some of your electric might do that, but to pull gas or electric in after your existing, very expensive for gas, almost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And then even though it's hard to pull utility in after you're up and existing, it's easier with electric. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light. What about maintenance? So that would be the next thing that we should talk about, right? Gas equipment, a little simpler. So the maintenance fees over a period of time should be less. Again, we're talking about a ginormous industry, big variety between factories, right? Some things are really well made and some things are less well made, right? So, but generally speaking, I think it's accurate to say that that gas equipment will be easier to maintain than the electric. Does that answer kind
Oh,
of,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Here's an interesting question. Is one faster than the other? So we got three things we're talking about. I think now we've included induction as part of the conversation. Which one's faster?
Yeah, you're getting to the heart of the chef, right?
Yeah.
American customers want that food like, yesterday, right? So we need to have all of that fast, whether it's a range in a flame or a grill, a char grill, something like that. Again, generally speaking, gas is really fast compared to traditional electric. Bring induction into it, and now 94% efficient. And if you have the appropriate pan and it's nice and flat and not all banged up on the bottom, induction is going to win every time. It is just so darn fast. Yeah, so powerful, right? But again, that power comes with, some expenses, right? This equipment is a little bit more expensive. You want to take care of it. Yeah, here's one way that kind of electric will save if we end up, heading that way. Think about the infrastructure. Whenever you have a kitchen, you got to have a hood, right? You got to have a type 1 or type 2 hood. That has to vent off the heat that, is escaping from whatever you're doing, electric or gas, because none of it is 100% efficient, right?
Right.
So gas throwing off more of that excess, that residual energy, you need an RTU on the roof.
Mhm.
You need that thing, a bigger fan spinning
Oh,
faster,
yeah.
and you need more makeup air coming back into the kitchen, exclusively gas versus electric, right? Electric's more efficient, putting less of that into the environment. So that's an argument for for electric.
And in certain aspects, so like our national conference we do every year, we switched everything over to induction there, electric and induction, because
Right.
we have no hoods. We've got this open space, and we need to use that space there, and we're working in competition, right? So we need that speed for the competitors to be able
Yeah.
to get their stoves to heat up. So that's another reason to have speed as well.
Hey, I want to thank you for that. As a former competitor, I don't do too much of that anymore. But that was always so helpful. Cooking off of those electric ranges was like, oh my God,
I could never
you
tell
have to
when they were
design
hot
that into
either,
your
or
program. Yeah, you
yeah.
have to design that into your program so that you have enough time to get it done. I'm like, my sauce is still trying to come up to a simmer here. I can't get it reduced.
Well, and as soon as you turn it off too, other than the pan being hot, if you have the proper pans, they lose, unless it's cast iron, it's going to lose its heat pretty quickly because it's
Yeah,
magnetic, right? So I've always thought that was pretty cool.
this is true.
How
So
about
true.
flavor outcome? So, you and I over the years, we've had to roast peppers on the burners on top of the stove and different things. But, just in general usage of cooking with flame versus electric, what's the difference?
Yeah,
Flavor.
Chris, that's a really good question, right? We talked about cost, we talked about efficiency. So, performance in the way of flavor production, right? So clearly there are things that, could go either way. You're simmering a stock or something like that. You're not going to see a massive difference in the flavor. Uh, Deep fried items, not going to see a massive difference. You might see a different electric bill or gas bill. You might see, a little bit of speed difference. But you're not going to see a big difference there. So there are a couple of areas though, baking and you really, we've got some electric uh, char grills, but really electric would be a char broiler, right? Heat from above. And so you compare that with gas. There's a lot of similarities there. The baking. So scientists characterize gas heat as a moist heat, right? So you have this gas that's burning, and then it's yeah, producing the flame. Where electric, there's no gas. You have this piece of metal that is getting hot and emanating heat. So for baking, breads and things like that, in general, the industry feels that electric does a great job, probably a better job for baking across the board.
Mhm.
Um, roasting meats and things like that, you might have a little better humidity maintenance with the gas, right? So maybe that helps a little bit. But we could talk about some of these a little bit more specifically. But I think that's a good jumping off point. The baking, right?
Yeah.
Gas, moisture, heat, electric, dry. So dry with breads is usually better.
Yeah. Would you say so? I guess I want to ask one more question, then maybe let's get into specific performance on the different pieces of equipment. How about that?
Yeah.
So what about safety? Which one do you think is one more safe than another?
Yeah, that's a really good question too, right? I think that there's always going to be a challenge of safety with gas. And I'm not talking about, emissions or anything like that. I'm talking about lighting pilots, pilots going out, relighting pilots,
Don't you
flames.
love crawling on the floor, lighting the pilot for the oven all the time?
Right. Okay. So tell me, I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that can relate to this. In earlier in my career, I was in a hurry. I'm holding that pilot button in and I'm talking to somebody or they're distracting me. And,
Oh
10
gosh.
seconds goes by. And then I finally get the flame in the vicinity of that pilot and poof,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And there go my eyebrows. And I didn't have any nose hair at that time, so it wasn't a problem. But and I actually had hair then too. So uh, gas is always going to provide that safety issue that you're going to have to manage versus electric. You don't see the same. Good question.
Yeah.
Good. It's important, right? We're working with young folks. We're working in an environment that is inherently wild, right? The stress, the speed, all of that. People make mistakes.
Well, in time's money too, right? So we're talking about sitting there crawling to the floor and having to light that pilot middle of service. You shut
Mhm.
down the entire line during that time, and you've lost your eyebrows, lost your hair, and now you got safety concerns.
Right.
Not one of those things I thought so much until my almost 50s. I'm like, oh gosh, do I want to be crawling on the floor and lighting pilots at this point? No, no, I do not.
Yeah, so now I just worry about, the oncoming generation and the young folks, right? Because their world is moving even faster than
Oh
ours
yeah.
did. So,
And there's less people on the line than when we had before because there's less people in our industry. So whereas you and I might have worked in a club or a restaurant or a hotel where we had, a dozen people in the line, they're doing it.
yeah, you had the full brigade.
Yeah, there's no
Now,
brigades in it.
now it's like you've got a supervisor and a couple of assistants,
Yeah,
and you're responsible for getting it all done.
yeah.
So,
All right, let's go a little deeper.
yeah,
So a lot of products. You and I talk about a lot of equipment, obviously, because of things we do with the convention and whatnot, and all the different things that Middleby does, and all the equipment that's out there as well. So I have particular love for pizza. So I'll
you
make that the
do.
first one. I got the Monter's Pizza behind me over here. What's the best? What's best for pizza?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to vote for the electric. It's even and it's dry, and that's really what you want with pizza. And you can also get high temperature. People think that you can't get the same temperature. We have a high temperature pizza oven gets 932 degrees, right?
Well,
So
and,
if
and
that's
there's
what you're doing,
and
yeah,
there's the irony, chef. So if you want a Neapolitan certified pizza, it either has to be wood fired or electric.
right,
So
right.
it can be electric. So because you
Mhm.
can only get it to that temperature that sponsors it. So that's a great point.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
deep
good
frying.
question. Pardon me?
What's the best for deep frying?
Okay, so really similar. It's hard to pull one out. And so the choice there, Chris, I think is going to have to be on, what utility is most cost effective in your area. It's probably going to be gas. But again, you're balancing that out, right? You've got to have the RTU on the roof, and then, you're going to be, how many times have you felt the heat coming out of the back of those fryers?
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
On a separate
I've
note,
seen
we've
the,
got that solved
I've seen
though.
the
We've got
flames coming out the back of the fryers.
right. So yeah, they're faster. The electric if speed is your goal, then the gas is going to win. But outside of that, their performance we're talking about, not the cost and stuff like that. The performance is really going to be similar. Gas would be faster.
How about stovetop burners?
Yeah, so I think this is probably where chefs are going to go for gas as well. They should. It's less efficient, but we're talking about performance and maybe even flavor development, right? So the gas is going to be faster than electric by a long shot. This is the one you've hit on the one where there is the most difference. It's the range top.
Well, how else am I going to get that flame off when I'm sautéing and I
Yeah,
pour
how are you going to
oil?
deglaze and yeah, flambe?
There's nothing
Yeah.
exciting about an electric flambe.
Yeah, you pull out those long lighters and yeah,
How
looks
about
looks a little odd.
how about griddles?
Yeah, so gas griddles and electric are kind of you got to think about those like ranges and skillets, right? So the heat's coming up through. Gas is going to be far faster and far more. Um, uh, it's just going to be quicker than electric. I got to tell you though, we are making electric high temperature griddles now. So we're not really saying plancha anymore. Plancha is, a griddle that operates at about 700 degrees. Ours go from 200 to 700. So we say high temperature plancha. There's a bunch of cool technology, Chris, that this isn't the right call for that, but I'd love to share more of that with you. But these induction planches are super, and I would say that would probably beat gas too because our heaters are as fast because of the induction. Yeah.
Char broilers.
Yeah, I'm glad you said broiler, right? We have to distinguish broiler from grill, right? Grill's the heat from the bottom. If you think about that, and I know you didn't ask, but I want to just be clear. You've got a gas flame from the bottom, and then there's what's called a heat diffuser, like a little tent over that, so that whenever the food drips down, it doesn't clog up the gas, the flames, but it also helps disperse that temperature more evenly. Think about that with electric, right? So you have this cowl rod down there that's throwing the heat, and then you have air between that and the heat dispenser, and then the air above that to the grate. So these are char grills are very few and far between. You would probably be better to have a griddle that has the crosshatch grooves cut in it.
Yeah.
But whenever it comes to broilers, now this is a really good fight, right? They're both, gas throws a lot of heat, but now we can, it's not induction, but it's infrared technology
Yeah.
that we can have with electric. And so, my gas broiler, I'm going to have that in that compartment, 650 degrees. In my infrared electric, I can get 1,100 degrees in there.
Mm.
So if speed is what you want, there it is.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful. We now talk to people whenever they think about buying these, you want uniformity. Think about a piece of chicken, thick on this end, thin on that end. That thin end gets black and done really fast while
Oh, yeah.
the thick end is still going. But 1,100 degrees, 1,000 degrees, that's a lot of energy to be working with. And so no matter what, you've got to unfortunately, I kind of flipped over into Cajun a couple of times by not paying close enough attention. So
But you do see a lot of steakhouses though that really like the big steakhouses using those heavy char broilers at those high temperatures. So I could see the efficiency of using something like that might work better.
yeah, yeah. So there's that infrared piece, but then we should probably talk a little bit just about the flavor too, because there's a distinct flavor, whether you like that or not, distinct flavor that comes with flame, and
Yeah.
then the wood assist in some of
Mm.
these
Oh yeah.
grills and pizza ovens. Even you can have wood assist, so you can have two energies kind of in there, dual fuel, so to speak. And
Then I
you'll
gotta
never
ask.
replace that flavor, no matter how much you char in proteins. You're
Yeah.
never going to replace that flavor one for one without the flame and the wood. Yeah.
You know, there's that blasphemous question. What about barbecue?
Right. This is good. So when you say barbecue, want to distinguish that from smoke or
I would say
maybe?
smoke, so not grilling,
Yeah. Okay.
barbecue.
So smoking, I think, again, for efficiency, we have a unit that has its chip bin on the outside, and that's a cow rod. That's electric
Yeah,
that really does a good job of that. Um, but we also have probably the only charcoal oven. We're developing a charcoal oven. Like you have charcoal grills and that sort of thing. Developing a charcoal oven, and we have some gas in there, and we're also playing with electric to see what works the best.
yeah.
Um, I think the same conversation holds over for them, right? The electric is going to be slower, but a little bit more even. I don't think we get the chips smoking as fast as gas, but then you have all of that inefficiency with gas too. So, but maybe that helps you turn it off faster.
You're never going to win this one with me. I'm using logs outside in an offset.
Yeah. I kind of get that too.
Uh, here's
It's hard. It would be hard. Well, okay. So you bring up a really good point, right?
I do use a blow. I do have electric in there though. I'm using a blower in there for efficiency of that space. So it's not, although it's not, I'm not electric in there for the heat. Um,
I see them with propane and
yeah.
that works really well to get that wood going. Volume, probably. How are you going to do a large volume of wood with electric, right? You're going to have to use some flame, right? So
Of course.
you're no arguments for me, man. I'm still on the fence with all of this, and that's why I'm so happy to have this conversation. I'm hoping that we're going to continue and learn and twist this up, but
Some of it comes from preference. Some of it comes from preference, right? Some of it comes from efficiency. Some comes with what you're forced to do, as we're saying in
mhm.
certain areas.
Yeah.
But then it gets something like a combi oven. The combi oven, I think we're very specific on there. What do you think a combi oven is best?
Yeah, so because combi ovens, you can bake in them. You don't really go out and buy a combi oven to bake a bunch of bread, right? You might bake a little bread today. You might steam some vegetables and cook some protein later. That's really the life of a combi. So I think that electric is just as good as gas. Again, chefs just I gotta have gas. Hopefully, this conversation, at least has them understand. I want to go back to that barbecue for just a quick
Sure.
second,
Yeah.
Chris. And I know you're going to get to the sustainability piece, and I think whenever people say that, it really does have to do with the greenhouse emissions that come off of burning gas, right? But we've got to at some point quantify that, and maybe we will in this call. But to take a barbecue place and say, listen, you have to do this with electric. I mean, that's pretty significant change. That's every bit as big as saying, look, you're going to starting tomorrow pay 4 to 7 times more for that utility. How
Yep.
can we do that? So whenever we talk about sustainability, that's a bigger conversation too that has to be quantified.
Yeah. Um, so efficiency. We mentioned we're going to talk about sustainability in a second, but
Yeah, we probably should chat
efficiency
about
in
that.
comparison. What do you think is the most efficient overall? So we talked about the efficiency of the flame itself, but I would say there's a lot more to it besides that. What are your thoughts on efficiency?
So sorry, that's still a little vague. When you say, I
So
thought we could.
we have wasted heat, but there's
Mhm.
also cooling time.
Yeah.
There's going from burner to burners, going from dish to dish. There's so much time and efficiency on workload, I would say, that's
Yeah.
different. Being able to use each one, I think there is. Maybe I'm wrong.
So I think I understand, and I have to say, induction with the right pans, uh, it's the most efficient, clearly, hands down. I don't think anybody can argue that. Um, and then electric is efficient, but it has some more limitations. Both of those two are expensive compared to gas. So quantifying, the criteria for efficiency, just like sustainability, what is your criteria?
Some of the things I think about at the end of the day, when you used to break down the kitchen station, how much easier would it be at the end of the night to have an induction? The electric ranges, even I remember the old school ones, they had the plates on top, and they were kind of difficult to clean.
Mhm.
Induction, you're just wiping down the top, but the efficiency of the end of clean at night, you have to pull apart the entire gas stove to clean that thing, right?
Right, right. And then, they're designed, yeah, to be easy to clean. That is the section of those three technologies, induction and electric, are seeing the most advancement because of this conversation that we're having, right? And the legislation that's coming down the pipe. Um, Gas is still a great option. It just has not needed to morph. It has not needed to, um, come up with new forms, new ways where electric has
Yeah.
to get where it's at. It has, and it would be a mistake not to say that. How much advancement has come in electric equipment, induction equipment, efficiency, durability. All of that is the electric side is advancing faster than the other. And I'm not proposing that, you take one over the other.
Yeah, sometimes it's necessity. I mean,
Right.
honestly, the home, because obviously I'm cooking at home more these days, being running an office for the ACF. I happen to live in northern Florida, and our water table's high here, so you don't have gas run to house here. You have
Right.
to have gas tanks. I haven't had that in a while here, so I've been cooking on electric for the last 4 years. I've adapted to it. I can still cook on it. It's damaged my pots though, or my pans. So I have nice
Right.
all-clad and Mulvial pans, and the all-clad ones particularly have beveled on the bottom of them now.
Yeah. So having less immediate control over that temperature does have a knock-on effect
Yeah.
on a lot of pans, not just aluminum, but bimetal. They
These are
last.
all-clad. I mean, these are
Yeah,
tri
not
these are
as long. Yeah.
triply.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have the old cool ones. I was sucked into it years ago, getting the all clads that had how our inexpensive aluminum pans have that rough side. All clad
Right.
years ago is
The
the master
anodized.
series.
Yeah.
They
Anodized
made
aluminum is
they
the
made it
coating.
look
Yeah.
like it was cool to have cheap pans that were expensive from all clad.
Mhm. Right.
All right, let's get the sustainability question, the big one.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got to hit this, right?
Is
So,
electric greener? What about
yeah.
politics,
Yeah.
regulations? What do you think?
Yeah. So, again, sustainability for this part of the conversation, let's say this is earth friendly, right? If we're talking about earth friendly, I want to tell you that gas, when you burn it, it emits greenhouse gas emissions, right? So this is said to hurt the ozone, um, where electric does not do that. And so that's I think the crux of it. Now, it wouldn't be right for us just to say that and leave it go. You have to quantify that, right? And so once I heard that, I started on this journey to try to figure out, okay, how much negative impact is that? And so this is what I found, and you're going to have to kind of read it for yourself and come to your own conclusion, right? Because I'm still trying to figure it out. So I read recently that the all of the commercial gas equipment in this country is equal to the emissions that put out is equal to annually 500,000 automobiles. That sounds pretty significant, right? That seems to
Yeah,
be a lot of greenhouse gas emissions until you figure out how many cars do we have on the highway. Almost 300, just under 300 million cars running around per
yeah,
year. So now we're
that's
looking
nothing.
at 1/30th, right? So this is really kind of a small thing. And then,
Yeah,
pull out of that, and I don't have the number of electric cars. It's clearly growing. Um, Pull that out, right? And that's something that you're going to need to quantify and think about. I'm still trying to figure that out myself, right?
yeah,
So there's no argument. Gas produces these emissions. How bad? How much impact? What are you willing to give up?
yeah,
Whenever we first started talking about this, Cruz, I think I brought this point up, and I'm going to say it again. Sustainability is that it's greenhouse gas emissions. but it's more than that. You're going to tell a mama papa operation, or you're going to tell a barbecue operation that tomorrow they're going to start paying 4 to 7 times more for the utility to produce their product. I mean,
Well, not even that. I think you're going to
how
put,
sustainable is
you're just
that?
going to take, you go down to the Carolinas. Lord help us. Just barbecue will just end.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're going to have like outlaws out there.
Yeah.
There's going to be, people on
I've
the
got
side of the
smoke.
road burning,
I've got natural smoked barbecue out back.
I can see the underground, right? The barbecue underground.
You want some barbecue pig? Meet me out back.
Right.
So politics, touching politics, where do you think
Yeah. Yeah.
politics and
So,
regulation are going?
it's easy to kind of track. As I said earlier, this legislation for exclusively electric commercial kitchens, Washington State and California. I'll let you draw that conclusion. Then I'm going to add to that New York City,
Yep.
Detroit, Chicago, Denver. You make the call. Now I'm based in Dallas. We're hearing none of that.
Yep.
And as you could guess, we're in oil country, right? Right down the road
Yep.
is Houston, and
And I'm in the state
we're
of
oil
Florida. We're
country.
not going to hear
So
that anytime soon either. So
yeah, I do not expect to hear anything about electric in this area. Again, not saying one's right or one's wrong. That's why we're having this talk, because, chefs are going to have to kind of come to their own conclusions. And hopefully today, we've been able to talk about some of the key issues and maybe get them farther down the road. It,
yeah,
it certainly is a bigger issue. And I know that you have, another kind of phase or another portion, another version or another episode
yes.
kind of queued up for similar conversations.
April
So I
9th.
think
Yeah.
it's going to be great.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Chris in a second after we
Yeah.
close up. Chef, before I get into questions, do you have any other things you want to follow up on any of those things before I get into questions?
Yeah, I do. I have one. When we were talking about sales in the US, we said 80 gas, 20 electric. We did not talk about Europe. And my company is global. And so I happened to, in preparation, reach out to the European president, and I got his numbers too. And I wondered, do you want to take a stab at that? So we're talking about Europe in general, UK, all the way over. Um, food, food equipment ratio, gas to electric.
Yeah, Europe to me, I've always noticed seems a little bit more progressive in these sort of green areas. If we're talking about other areas of the world, I would say the complete opposite. But
Mhm.
I would almost be willing to say 60-40, 40% gas, 40% electric, 60% gas.
Okay, so that's exactly what it is. It's 65-35 from our company, what we're
Yeah,
selling out there. 65 electric, 35 gas, right? So that's almost the inverse of this country. So you had it right on the money. As I traveled over there and competed, all of the kitchens were electric.
yeah.
We rarely saw open flames. So, it's clearly a different approach over there from the very beginning. So,
Which is so wild to me because we think of the stoves that you and I both started on, the French flat tops, which, not even that far before. We're neither one of us are old by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know of kitchens that were still using wood in some of those French flat tops.
right.
So Danielle was not using them long before. I would imagine they were on gas, but if it had been open 20 years earlier, it might have still used flames. So our gas,
Hey, I want the
our
listeners
wood.
to know
So
too that we have requests for not only wood ovens, but
yeah.
also, solid fuel, wood fuel grills and ovens and things
Oh
like
yeah.
that. There's a demand for that. There's a
Open fire cooking
desire.
is open fire cooking was one of the trends I tracked for a number of years, and that's one of my. Sorry to go off the trend and off the topic, but to me, it's one of my favorite things also is seeing that too. And I think that just shows the full dichotomy of this whole entire conversation, that it's not just about gas versus electric, it's versus what the preferences of flavor. So then we go back to that question on flavor. Why are we cooking with that? We're cooking with that wood on those open grills for flavor. I worked
Mhm.
at two restaurants where we had open fire grills with logs, and clearly we were doing that for flavor.
Yeah, and there's of all the things that we do, there's no replacement for that. Don't have that technology yet.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm okay with that. It's fun. We used to call it the beast, I remember, because it was just
Right.
sweat pouring off of you at the end of the day. That's for your
But the
20s.
pride of working that station,
Yeah.
and getting that stuff out of there
Yeah. I
and
don't
not
want to do
burning anything.
that. Well, just your arms.
Right.
All right, I've got one question, Chef.
Yeah.
'Cause I think we've answered so many questions that we're going through, which is not a bad thing.
Right.
So the question is food trucks. Obviously, so the couple questions: what would you use in a food truck, and how does it drive costs for food trucks?
Yeah, so we do a lot of business with food trucks, and we see the majority. And I would say, when I say majority, I would have to say more than uh, at that 80% or more electric. Uh, However, we also put propane in them as
Hmm.
well. But there's a lot of electric. Um, it really, what it depends on, the more I think about it, is the concept itself and what piece of equipment you need. They'll try to use as much wood as they can because it's easier and cheaper to manage. But electric for certain things, you really get certain types of ovens work well for that, griddles
Yeah.
and things like that. But then pulling in enough electric becomes a challenge. So you'll see propane, but we see a lot of propane, a lot of electric.
Yeah. Well, that was our question.
Yeah.
So, Chef, you got anything to close out? What are your closing thoughts?
I just wanted to thank you, Chris, and the ACF. This is really a timely topic. It goes to, relevance for the ACF. We're providing uh, good information. I'm so fortunate to be in a position to be able to glean some of this information and share back with the chefs. The last thing I'll say is, and I might have mentioned it earlier, but when I worked in operations, my thought was different. I didn't have to consider whether it was gas or electric. Most of it was already there. A couple of kitchens that I was able to design, I could pick and choose what I wanted. But this conversation is going to be more important for folks moving forward in the industry. You're going to hear more about this, and so to become more knowledgeable is going to be essential. And this is kind of a good start. So happy to be part of that,
And
helping
that's why we're
people.
here, Chef. 100%. Thank you for imparting that knowledge. Without you here, without the support that we've seen from you at Middleby for what we're able to do for the ACF with the convent. So talking on this conversation, you'll be at the national convention with us, and
Will.
we have kitchens that are fully done by Middleby.
Mhm.
For our competition kitchens, as well as our sport competition kitchens that everyone's going to start seeing. So I think it'd be interesting to see the proliferation of all the efficiency of electronic, especially the induction stuff that we're going to see this summer.
Yeah, Middleby is so proud. I'm personally so proud to not only be a sponsor there, but help out in other ways. If we could talk more about equipment where we're there, I'd love to be able to do that. And then any evaluations, but to see the variety that we'll have, and people will be able to get this. They'll be able to see induction, electric, out there, and make a serious comparison. And maybe that's something we do, Chris. Maybe we do kind of book a couple of tours and just talk briefly about this and this.
Well, you've heard it, everyone. Chef Scott's offered to do some tours and demos
I'm
and
there.
everything.
I'm there.
100%. So I'm looking forward to that, Chef. Oh, as always, I enjoy our conversations. Looking forward to the next one. I appreciate taking the time to share your important insights on gas and electric stove kitchens with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So happy to be able to do it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, please be on the lookout for the survey you'll receive the next day or so, which you'll need to complete to earn your continuing education hours. We hope you'll join us next week, as Chef and I just mentioned, on April 9th with Chef Christopher Galarza, CEC, CCA, ECC, WCEC. It continues today's discussion with a webinar on electric kitchens and sustainability. Then on May 21st, Chef Tiffany Poe will present a webinar on May's trending topic on AI in the culinary industry. We also invite you to register for our 2025 ACF National Convention, where you can hear from a variety of expert presenters covering all of our trending topics for this year. The event is filled with tons of educational presentations, networking opportunities, and delicious meals. We hope to see you there. To learn more about the upcoming webinars at ACF National Convention, visit acfchefs.org and click on the Events tab. On behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again to Chef Scott and for bringing us this wonderful opportunity. And thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.
Take care, everybody.